Salut tout le monde, it's your boy Lukael and welcome to part 2 of my 2024 movies tier list video. So we went through I think 95 movies in the first part and we're only halfway there. So we're gonna go through the second half of the movies that I saw this year and try to rank them relative to each other. Although again, it is a pretty difficult, maybe even pointless process because all these movies are so different, but it's really just a way for me to talk about the movies that I watched and which one I liked, and maybe give you guys some recommendations, maybe make you discover some movies you haven't seen. And so I say so often also. I definitely noticed from editing my own videos that like it's one of my verbal tics or like speech patterns. I hope it doesn't get too annoying. Now that I've said it, you won't be able to unhear it, but anyways. So after editing the first video, I realized this might have been a mistake because I think the first part of this is the video that took me the longest to edit. Like it took me hours and hours because like I have to just go through all the things I say, try to piece it together into something coherent, and then like having to add the little pictures up here, add the little text up here, add some music. Like it took for fucking ever. I think it took the longest out of any of my videos, safe except maybe for the supercuts, which are mostly just about rewatching my whole playthroughs and like just picking up some little scenes. But anyways, I've started it, so it's not like I can give up on it. We need to finish what we've started, right? So I'm gonna do part 2 today. I don't know if this is gonna be a yearly tradition on the channel, maybe if I have time, but this is very time consuming and it's not even game related, so I don't even know if anyone's actually gonna be interested. But anyways, let's finish what we started by reviewing the rest of these movies. And before we get started, I will take like a second look through these and see if maybe since, what is it, last week, maybe some of my opinions have changed slightly, some of my recollection. I think I was probably a bit harsher on these movies just because they go back much further in the year. And so the longest it's been since I've seen it, the more like hazy they get in my memory. So let's go through these. Is Existenzi the worst movie I saw this year? These three are about on par, where like they're not the worst movie ever, but I really didn't enjoy them that much. Promising Young Woman, I might have been a bit harsh on. I didn't really like the direction it went for the ending, but it's a pretty competently made movie. Donnie Darko, I can't take too long going back through these. I need to kind of trust my own opinions from last time. I think I was a little bit generous with Twilight. Okay, Ocean Wave's better than fucking Twilight, come on. Donnie Darko also is just, I think it's a movie you really need to see multiple times to really kind of get it. And I only saw it the one time, so that's probably why it's that low for me, but... Okay, Birdemic's too high, even if you consider like the funny factor. I need to bring it down. RoboCop's a little too high. I think Indiana Jones a little too high too. I think Isle of Dogs needs to go down a bit. It's very unique, but there's something about it that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Maybe it's just because it's got this kind of eerie vibe to it, but... And again, if it seems like I'm being harsh on these, I don't think any of these are like bad movies. You know, all of these, they're okay, which to me okay is like, you know, it's a passing grade. I had an okay time watching them. I was entertained. They're just not like that amazing to me, you know? Cool as Ice, higher than Blade Runner. That's not right, is it? All right, let's bring it down. Okay, as funny as it is, I guess I can't really have it this high, can I? I wasn't like a huge fan of the story in Blade Runner and like some of its choices, but it does have like such a unique atmosphere, such great visuals to it, and like it does tackle kind of like androids and AI at a time where that wasn't really being done in movies, so like I have to try and judge it in the context of its release a little bit more. Dracula Dead Loving It, probably a bit too high. Clockwork Orange should move up. These two I could probably move up also. I think Clockwork Orange I put too low. I actually quite enjoyed it. Tupampoko I put too high. Actually, just rewatched North by Northwest with my girlfriend last night. It's good. Maybe I put it like a little too high. Let me bring it down a bit. Only Yesterday might be a little bit too high also. I think I was really generous with Crimson Peak just because visually I think it's a beautiful movie, but if you look at the story overall, it's not that special of a story. I could probably bring it down a bit. Singing in the Rain maybe a little too high. Treasure Planet maybe a bit too high. Heat is really fucking good. Should I split the Star Wars? I think I kind of like the Star Wars, just gatekeeping exceptional, but I could potentially split them up. Call Tyrone, I really want to see it again. Like, I have a very good impression of it from just the one viewing. Maybe if I saw it multiple times, I would sour on it a bit. And like, I don't really want to rank these. I want to leave them kind of unranked. Yeah, I can't rank these. Every time I'm like, oh, this one's also really good. This one's also really good. Like, I just keep wanting to put them all at the top, but you know, I like all of these. I can't really rank them. I think, yeah, so you saw some stuff move around a little bit, but like overall, I'm fairly consistent with my opinions. Again, a lot of these I only saw the one time, so maybe if I saw them multiple times, I could forge a better opinion of them. This is all mostly based on first impressions and just like my thoughts after seeing them just the one time, so I keep saying so. So yeah, that's where things stand for now, and let's get to ranking some of them. Next movie on the list is Little Miss Sunshine from 2006. Also, I realized I haven't really said that much about the movies that I reviewed. Like, I kind of ranked them assuming you knew what they were about and like assuming you kind of had seen them. And I realize now I probably should have given like at least a very, very short summary of what the movie is about. Of course, the video would have been even longer if I'd done that, but it might help you get a better idea of like what they are, because some of these are a little bit more obscure. So Little Miss Sunshine is about this family that goes on a road trip. I'm gonna give you like just the simplest of premises, okay? It's a family that goes on a road trip so a little girl can participate in like a beauty pageant. It's a funny story about this very dysfunctional kind of underdog family having to work together and accept each other and bonding through this hilariously unlucky road trip where like everything goes wrong, and it's fun to see them argue and butt heads, but by the end you really cheer for them. Like, you want to see them succeed because they go through all these horrible things. So some great characters, good pacing. The common goal of their final destination really keeps the movie in focus the whole time despite all the obstacles they run into, and some pretty funny performances from Paul Dano and Michael Scott. What's his damn name? Steve Carell. Not one I thought I was going to enjoy that much, but as the movie kept going, I really did find myself cheering for them. So I thought it's either like low excellent or high pretty good for me. Yeah, I guess I would place it pretty high. Next is Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name from 2016. So this is an anime movie. This is not a Studio Ghibli movie. It's a Makoto Shinkai movie. I feel like Shinkai is kind of like picked up the torch after Miyazaki, because given I've only seen 2 of his movies, but both movies that I saw were fucking amazing. Visually, this is like spectacular. It's incredibly beautiful. It's like it has to be seen to be believed. It's so detailed, the animation is so smooth. Like, honestly, the Ghibli movies almost pale in comparison to the level of animation of the Makoto Shinkai movies. Like, they look that great. So just on visuals alone, it's a 10 out of 10 easily. But Your Name, also a very beautiful story. It starts as this kind of like funny Freaky Friday situation where like this boy and this girl, they kind of like keep switching bodies, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be like a funny kind of movie with these wacky situations, but then it keeps kind of building to this actually very, very serious, dramatic kind of twist, and I really did not see it coming. I thought it was going to be like kind of this funny haha movie, but it really reaches some very high emotional peaks and very, very compelling story. And like, I was so involved by the end. I was like, oh, I really hope they get to, you know, like succeed in what they're trying to do in the movie. And like, it's definitely one of the best movies that I've seen this year. It has to go all the way up here. Like, again, these are not really ranked, but Your Name is one of the best movies I saw this year for sure. Just exceptional. Next is Labyrinth from 1986. Dance, magic, dance. This is a great film. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's about this girl that kind of gets whisked away to this fantasy world after her little brother gets kidnapped by David Bowie. I think most people are familiar with this movie, but it's a great classic. It's got these beautiful, very creative sets, all these different puppets and little creatures that are all, of course, traditional effects. So the artistry and the craftsmanship that went into all the puppets and the sets and the costumes is just amazing. This is really the kind of movie they don't make anymore. And of course, as I say this, I think there's a rumor of it being remade, which is going to be probably terrible. I love how, yeah, it's kind of a rethread of like an Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz, but they know about this and they kind of like play it up in a very self-aware way. So it kind of pays homage to some of these previous stories, but also while being its own thing. It's got very nice music, of course. David Bowie's in there. Nice, satisfying story. Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie, you know, they're both kind of wooden in their acting. Like they're not great actors in this, but in a kind of charming way that works with the vibe, I thought. It also fits the very kind of dreamy tone the whole film has. So this is just a very memorable movie, which I really enjoyed. So, just because of all the work that goes into the puppets and like stuff like that, I do think this is an excellent movie. I think I would place it about this high. Next is Hairspray from 2007. I don't think I need to really give a summary for this one. I think it's a pretty well-known movie, right? It's this musical about these high school students and they're dancing and like, it's good. It's pretty different than I expected. Like I really thought it was going to be more of this like students into different factions and it's like this musical, but it actually takes a bit more serious turn than I thought because it delves into like racial injustice and like she's trying to fight for the rights of the black people in her town. It's well cast. The music is very catchy, of course, and just very good presentation overall. This type of musical is not typically up my alley, but I did enjoy this for what it was. I would say it was pretty good. I think I would bring it around this high. And again, I'm not really a musical person, not when they're just about like regular people, not just weird, fucked up shit. So this is about as high as I can place it. Next is Patama Inverted from 2013. So this is about this boy who meets a girl whose gravity is inverted. So instead of falling to the ground, she's falling towards the sky. And so the animation is decent, but the whole movie is kind of carried by this very crazy, over the top and very intriguing premise of like, how come she's falling up? How come like, and it's not just her, there's like a whole group of people who like their gravity is inverted. And so the concept itself is fascinating, very intriguing, and it's explored pretty well. There's a lot of cool little twists in the plot, but the story and the character themselves are pretty flat. Like there's not any great characters in this or like any great arcs. It has pretty good music and cinematography, but I think it had the potential to be a lot more than it is if they delved a bit deeper into the world and had some stronger characters. So just because of its very interesting premise, I'd say it was pretty good. Around there. Next, Taxi Driver from 1976. This is one of these classic movies that's often considered like one of the best ever, I think, or at least a very influential movie. It's about a taxi driver who kind of like takes it upon himself to become this kind of vigilante, if you even want to say that. This is a weird film. So I guess at the time, exploring the life and the kind of downward mental spiral of a lonely, pretty unstable guy was pretty novel because like it hadn't been done that much, but it didn't do much for me. Travis, the main character, he's, I assume intentionally, kind of unrelatable and unlikable. Like he's very unpleasant to people. He says some really weird thing. The dialogue in this whole movie is just so strange. People tell each other the weirdest things. And yeah, this guy is the kind of guy like you would just not want to be associated with at all. So I found it hard to get invested in any of what was happening. Again, because the dialogue between the characters is so awkward and nonsensical often. So a lot of scenes that just kind of lead nowhere. I guess the film is trying to say something about violence, but I found it kind of boring and meandering. I also really didn't like the ending. I found it very contrived and out of place for the kind of movie it was trying to be. So maybe an unpopular opinion, but I really did not enjoy Taxi Driver. Yeah, it was I think that's about as high as I can place it, really. Next is Whiplash from 2014. This is about this guy who's a drummer in a conservatory, and then he joins the orchestra or the band of this very kind of abusive teacher. This is a very intense but very powerful movie that's full of tension. It feels very up close and personal in the way that it's shot. It really looks great, great use of color, great use of lighting, and two really amazing performances by the two leads, Miles Teller and of course J.K. Simmons. You really find yourself rooting for and against them at different points in the story. It's really, really compelling. You can't wait to see where it's all going. I found it an interesting kind of deconstruction of, you know, passion, obsession, perfectionism, ambition, all these things. I also found the ending kind of like open-ended in its nature, which I appreciate. So Whiplash, one of the best movies I saw this year for sure. I think it goes up into exceptional. Of course, the sound design also excellent, as you would expect in a drumming movie. But yet, one of the best movies I saw this year for sure. Next is Hero from 2002. This was a rewatch for me. I'd seen it a long time ago. And I've always liked this one. 2002, yeah, I must have seen that when I was like 14 or something. I was like, oh, I totally get it. Like, you know, it's a film that feels a bit more like a moving painting or like a poem than a traditional martial arts movie, which is what it is really. Beautiful visuals, very impressive fight choreography. Jet Li is in this, my boy Donnie Yen is in this. Beautiful traditional soundtrack. It's at times very grand and epic in its scope, but then sometimes it's very peaceful and reflective. I really liked how each of the chapters in the movie has its own color palette. You know, there's a chapter where everything is in red, and then there's a chapter where everything's in blue and like stuff like that. You see these massive barren landscapes that really had a sense of scale. I also like the focus on a kind of smaller cast. There's only a few characters in this. It feels more like a fairy tale or like a legend come to life, which works thanks to the simplicity of the non-linear story, the environments. This movie is all about these very over-the-top action sequences, but all done kind of like in a very serene, tranquil way. So I really like this movie. I think it's excellent. It's a very hard one to judge. The hardest one to judge for me are those I've seen multiple times, like this one. And it just kind of landed there by mistake, but I think that's actually a pretty good spot for it. Next is Lightyear from 2022. It's a spin-off about what if Buzz Lightyear was like a real character and not just a toy? It's good. It's a very, very kind of standard movie. It's kind of wild when you compare the first Toy Story to this Lightyear. Like the 3D visuals have come such a long way. Everything here looks incredibly realistic. I mean, the characters are stylized, of course, but like the environments and the effects, everything looks very, very real. It's a nice, simple story with a likable cast, some funny moments. It's predictable, but it's charming and enjoyable. Especially love the little cat robot. Them tackling the concept of time dilation was also a nice surprise because again, you don't see it that often, even in sci-fi movies where it should be very prevalent, but I love that they did it here. So Lightyear, I think, was definitely pretty good. Probably place it around there. Quite enjoyed it. Next is Killers of the Flower Moon from 2023. First of all, I think this should have been a TV series because this movie is 3.5 hours long, which is way too long for any movie. No movie should ever be 3.5 hours long. In fact, what we did was we watched it in 2 parts because there's no way I'm gonna sit through 3.5 hours. It's very long and it's very slow, but they really do build up this story well. And by the end, you're really, really invested in seeing these fuckers get their comeuppance because the people in this are horrible, and it's the casual way in which they're doing these horrible things, like it's so horrific. When they do finally start facing the consequences of their actions, it's very satisfying because they've built up to it for so long. And so watching this, you're very angry and horrified by these characters, but it gets way worse when I actually learned that this was based on a real story. Like this is a real thing that happened, and of course some of it must be kind of changed just for the movie, but I can't believe people actually did this. There has been some criticism of this movie saying that it should have been focused on the Osage themselves instead of the white men that did all these horrible things to them. I kind of agree with that, but it is very effective storytelling, even though it's hella depressing. Just what we did to the First Nations on this continent and pretty much everywhere in the world is just fucking horrible. But I think it's pretty good. I would probably put it there. It's way too long for what it is, you know, but it is quite compelling. Next is In the Mood for Love from 2000. It's a movie about this man and woman. They kind of live in the same building, and I think their significant others are like having an affair with each other, and so they kind of start connecting also, and of course falling in love, but obviously it's a very strange situation, and this was a very interesting one. I love the style in which it's shot because it almost feels like they're in this other world. Like it's always very claustrophobic. It's always kind of nighttime. They're always in these very tight corridors and like tight streets. I kept telling my girlfriend, it almost feels like they live in like an underground city, you know? It gives it kind of this otherworldly feel. It feels very intimate and up close and personal. There's a very moody ambiance, the slow burn, the quiet moments between them, the music that repeats just like the days and meetings keep repeating. Despite them coming together, you feel the loneliness, and like despite the silence and the distance between them, you feel the emotion between them. Everything is very understated and restrained, much like their romance itself, but that's also what makes it so romantic and so sad. So this is a movie that's kind of all about vibes. There's not really that much even dialogue in it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. I would probably place it around here. It reminded me a little bit of Lost in Translation because, you know, it's about these two people that develop this relationship based on the weird situation that they're in, and like, but I enjoyed this one much more. Next is The Naked Gun, which of course is the movie based on the TV show Police Squad with Leslie Nielsen. I loved it. I love absurd humor. I love the visual gags, the puns. This is the kind of comedies they don't really make anymore, it seems. So it's just a good time. The end of it maybe has like a little bit too much baseball for my taste, but I really enjoyed this one. There's not much to say about it. It's just a very funny comedy. Place it around there maybe. It's pretty good. Next is In Bruges from 2008. I don't know why I watched this one. I guess it was like on a bunch of lists for best movies of that year. And I really did not like it at all. It's one of the rare movies where like halfway through, I almost considered kind of like just turning it off because like I really was not into it. The tone is uneven. The characters are very unlikable. The dialogue is just mean-spirited. The story doesn't seem to go anywhere. It does have a few funny moments, and I think its final arc is substantially better when Colin Farrell is not really a factor anymore and it's more focused on Fiennes and Gleeson, but just a very mean-spirited film about a story that really doesn't need to be told. Did not like this. At least there are some nice shots of the city of Bruges, but yeah, I thought this was bad. Did not like this at all. Next is Rear Window from 1954. This is a Hitchcock movie about a guy. He's stuck in his apartment because I think he has a broken leg. And so he just keeps observing the people through his window, and like he starts seeing some strange, suspicious things and like trying to investigate them. And I really enjoyed it. I've noticed about me that I tend to really like movies where everything kind of happens in one place and that have a very small cast of character. And like there's a few of these that qualify as such, you know. Get Out is a bit like that. Whiplash is kind of that, very small cast. Birdman, I think it's the case for like a lot of my favorite movies of the years. Like they have very small cast or they all happen in like one area. I think it's because it reminds me of theater. It gives the feel of a play, and I used to do theater when I was a kid and a teenager. So I don't know, maybe it takes me back to that. But this is very much the case in this one. Like it's one closed set and everything in the movie happens on this one set, which to me, I know there's something very charming about that. The dialogue is amusing in this, and as the characters get more engrossed in the mystery and the voyeuristic paranoia, you get also more invested in it. So it's engaging throughout, and I really wanted to see where it was going. This is one that they really could have ended in a number of different ways, but I thought the conclusion was pretty satisfying, so I think it's excellent. It belongs up here with some of these other. Next is Enola Holmes 2, which is the sequel, of course, to the first one, which I saw, I think, last year or the year before that. This is about the little sister of Sherlock Holmes who's trying to be a detective of her own, and this is with Millie Bobby Brown, of course, from Stranger Things fame. I would say I liked it about as much as the first one. I thought it was pretty good. Of course, I love detective stories, but this one is really more of like a convenient chain of events rather than an actual mystery being solved. It's more like she keeps stumbling upon the right things rather than piecing together the puzzle, but it was still enjoyable. Millie's acting, it's not exactly subtle in this. She kind of like winks at the camera a lot, but I think she's a fun lead. She's full of energy, and her relationship with Sherlock is pretty nice. The editing, it's very stylish and snappy, and has some nice music, some nice costumes. It wasn't until after the film I also learned it's based on like a real event, so it gave me a chance to learn about some actual history. I thought it was pretty good. Probably around there. Next is Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust from 2000. So this was my first introduction to the Vampire Hunter D franchise. I haven't read or seen anything else. So I thought I'd be kind of lost, but it does work well as a self-contained, albeit pretty simple story. The animation is great, the character designs are very stylish and creative. There's a lot of cool ideas in there, like mirror buildings and shadow creatures and vampire space rockets, just a lot of weird shit. But somehow it all works, and it gives you a glimpse into this very fascinating world that you kind of want to learn a bit more about. And we watched this one dub, and I thought the dub was surprisingly decent also. So this was... it was pretty good. I think I would place it like around there, maybe. Next is 12 Angry Men from 1957. So with a title like that, it does sound like the worst 2 hours ever, but it was actually really good. This is another one of these. We have a very small cast, and the whole movie takes place in the one location. And it's just about a group of jury who have to debate among themselves whether the accused is guilty or not. And so it's a very, very simple premise, but because it's very well written, it's just excellent. It's well shot, it's got very smart, believable, pretty thought-provoking dialogue, and some compelling characters. I thought the topics that it brings up and that they discuss in this are still very relevant to this day. Really makes you think. This one is excellent. I think it deserves its status as a classic. I think it belongs at least all the way up here. Next is They Live from 1988. It's about this guy who accidentally discovers that there's a bunch of aliens, I guess, hiding among society. This is a weird movie, but it was fun. It's kind of slow to start, and then it sort of rushes to its conclusion, I felt. This one is very campy. The dialogue is pretty bad, and the one-liners are really bad. The protagonist just seems incapable of like communicating normally. Like I kept thinking, just tell people what you want to say, but he wouldn't tell anyone anything. He was like communicating in these weird one-liners except just speaking his mind. The plot and the concept are so laughably basic. It's like, society's actually controlled by these aliens, dude. Like, it feels like a satirical throwback on purpose, but I feel like they actually thought they were saying something deep with this one, which they really weren't, but it's an alright movie. I thought it was okay. Yeah, around here, it's okay. Next is 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968. This is of course a classic. This was a rewatch for me. I'd seen it once a couple years ago for the first time, and it's still a masterpiece of sci-fi. Like, this is like the Rosetta Stone of sci-fi movies, because once you see this, every other sci-fi movie you watch through the decades, you're like, oh, I can see how this was influenced by 2001. The special effects and ideas are just groundbreaking. It's so ahead of its time, and it still holds up in every way. Like the scenes that take place in space in this one, I don't think you could make them look any better, even if you made them today. Like, it still holds up 100%. And this is a movie that came out before we even landed on the moon. Like, that's so... It's so amazing how they were able to envision this futuristic world and like how space travel would work, and like, I don't know, it's just amazing. Unbelievably realistic in its depiction of space travel. Hal, the robot, is both fascinating and scary. The whole movie, it's at time grandiose and then eerie, but then hopeful, but then horrifying. This must have blown people's mind at the time it came out, definitely. So for me, this is an exceptional movie. Really, it can't be anything else. It definitely deserves to be all the way up here for me. Like, this is the grandfather of all the sci-fi genre, it feels. Okay, next is The King's Speech from 2010. This is a movie about the king that was in England at the time that the Second World War started. I forgot his name. But the one that had a speech impediment, and that's kind of what the whole movie is about. It's pretty good. It's got good dialogue, some great performances from Colin Firth somehow, because I really thought he was terrible in Dorian Gray. I thought he was so bad in this movie, but he is quite good in The King's Speech. Great performance from Geoffrey Rush, who I think is great in anything he does. Seeing the relationship between them evolve is quite enjoyable. I do always find it pretty hard to have like sympathy or to relate to royals like kings and presidents and things like that, but I think the movie does a pretty good job of showing that it's not all nice and rosy for him. Like, he did have a pretty shit life despite being a king. Because the guy is like kind of a jerk for the whole movie, but by the end you do understand his identity struggles and like feel the weight of responsibility that's on his shoulders. So I think it did win me over by the end, even though I felt like he was still kind of a jerk. I thought King's Speech was pretty good. Stargate's too high. Blade Runner has just kept climbing this whole video somehow. I guess that says something. Next is Last Stop in Yuma County from 2023. I think this is a bit of a lesser known title. This is another movie. It all takes place in one place and it's got a very small cast of characters. So again, really love that. It's about a bunch of people stuck like in a diner in the middle of the desert, and then there's like some killers among them, and you can imagine kind of where it's gonna go. It's a very Tarantino-esque premise. I thought it was really good, especially for a directorial debut. This is that director's first movie. It's really hard to miss with these everyone is stuck in one room kind of scenarios. It's well shot, it's got some nice characters, some good tension, and it actually goes in quite unexpected places. Like, wherever you think it's gonna go, it probably goes in a different place. It's just, what if all these people just made the worst decisions in the situation? So it could honestly have been a bit longer, and I rarely say this about a movie. I kind of like when movies are a little bit on the shorter side, but this one could have been a bit longer. I think if maybe you sprinkled in like a little bit more humor throughout, it might have brought the movie up just a little bit, but overall, really good. I'm tempted to bring it all the way to exceptional, just to encourage people to watch it. I don't know if it reaches all the way up there for me, but it was definitely excellent. Maybe like up here, but I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't. It's truly excellent. Next is Black Klansman from 2018. I enjoyed this one okay. Like, these undercover cop stories, they're always naturally filled with tension just by their nature. You of course really want them to succeed in their mission and not get discovered by the KKK. The tone did feel a bit uneven to me. It's like it wants to be this serious biopic about a real guy that actually existed, but then it's also a bit more like this over-the-top blaxploitation movie. It was pretty interesting to actually learn about the real guy this is based on, but they really did take a lot of liberties with his life. I thought it's like a low pretty good. Somewhere around there, I think. Next is The Great Gatsby from 2013. Did not like this movie at all. The editing style and the visuals are so cluttered and messy. Everything looks fake and very chaotic. I think the modern songs did not work, and it's just not an interesting story. Like, Tobey Maguire's character feels completely pointless in this. Carey Mulligan was just vapid, and DiCaprio, you know, he's acting his ass off as he always does. But Gatsby, he's unrelatable, unlikable. Just stop trying to make me feel bad for billionaires, okay? It's not gonna work. I don't feel bad for these ultra rich people. I don't care if his girlfriend left him years ago and now he's really sad. It's like, I don't care. You're a billionaire. Like, f off. Like, some of the costumes were kind of nice, I guess, but it's way too long for a nothing story. I did not like this one at all. It's bad. It's better than In Bruges, but not by much. Next is Deadpool and Wolverine from 2024, this year. So is this the first Marvel movie in this list? I think it probably is, right? Except I guess if you want to count the Spider-Man animated movies, but they're not really part of the MCU. When it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, here's where I stand. I actually really enjoy them, and I know they've definitely lost a lot of their popularity in recent years ever since the end of Avengers Endgame. It's kind of the popular thing now to shit on the MCU, and like, I get it. Some of the latest ones have been kind of weaker for sure. But for me, they're the perfect going out to the movie theater films. You go out there to the cinema, you get yourself a little popcorn, you get this film with some nice action scenes, some comedy. It's always this kind of self-contained story, and then you have a good time, you watch it, you go back home. You know, that's kind of all I need these movies to be. So me and my girlfriend, I think we saw like pretty much most of the MCU movies out in theaters when they came out, and like we always had a good time with them. And of course, because there's so many of them, it's almost like a TV show where like you get rewarded for watching all of them because they kept having these little references and little crossovers from characters from other movies. And of course, it all culminated with the Avengers Endgame. And then yeah, it kind of fell flat after this, but all this to say, people don't really like the MCU anymore. I'm always a fan. I still think they're fun movies, and so when it comes to the Deadpool films, I've always liked them. The first one's excellent, the second one's also great, and this one was even better. This is a movie that's almost nothing but fan service for fans of the comics or like of Marvel. Lots of really funny jokes, some really good action, great chemistry between Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't know what more I can really ask for. For me, this is one of the best movies I saw this year. Like, you can be like, what? You've got a Marvel movie up and exceptional? I don't know what to tell you. I still really enjoyed these movies, and like this one was really funny, had some good action. The surprises, like in case you haven't seen it yet, some of the cameos and characters that they brought back from like other franchises and other things kind of blew my mind. It really popped me in the theater when I saw these characters show up, so it felt kind of made specifically for me. So is the MCU kind of on a downward slope now? Sure, but unless you're like allergic to fun, I think they're still alright. Next is Dogma from 1999. It's a movie about like two fallen angels trying to get back into heaven, but then it's gonna cause the end of the world because of like some loophole in the rules. It's basically just a comedy about like angels and demons, and so it's a fun watch. I like how down to earth it is. It tackles these very big topics, of course, of like gods and angels, but it does it in a very casual way. You know, it's all in good fun. Not everything in it lands, but most of it is pretty clever and pretty well written. I think ultimately what works is that it never really takes itself that seriously. And so I thought it was pretty good. Somewhere around there, maybe. It's pretty good. Next is Roman Holiday from 1953. This was a nice fun watch. It's a very classic story, of course. It's about this princess who like escapes to go spend the night out in town, and then like she meets a guy and like he knows who she is and like she knows who he is, but they're both kind of hiding their identity from each other. And so very classic story of escaping your duty and quid pro quos and secret identities. It's all very charming and romantic. There's always kind of a lovable awkwardness to these old movies and how people interact, and like I love the carefree and lighthearted feel of it. Some good chemistry between the two leads also, and a quite good touching conclusion, I thought. So this one was pretty good. Somewhere around there, perhaps. Next is Escape from New York from 1981. This is a John Carpenter's movie with Kurt Russell, where the island of New York has been transformed into like this giant kind of prison, and somehow these prisoners, they've like kidnapped the president, and so they need to send in like an agent on the island to rescue the president. And it's pretty good. I think it starts off great with a simple but amazing setup and a premise with like a lot of potential. It has some great ambiance and sets, and Kurt Russell is perfect in the role. I did find the second half a bit more underwhelming. I wish they'd done more with the premise. So I thought it was maybe like somewhere around there. Next is Smokey and the Bandit from 1977. Not typically into like driving movies. This is about a guy who's like I think they're trying to like transport a truck of alcohol across multiple states or something. But it's very funny. This was a very enjoyable watch. It has a really fun and lighthearted feel to it the whole time. Some very playful dialogue. I really liked how much camaraderie there is between the strangers that they keep meeting. Like, it's like everyone in the world is united in this one cause of getting this guy to reach his destination in time. So it's a simple story with some nice stunts and action, a likable cast, and some pretty good music too. It's worth seeing just for the crazy sheriff character, honestly.
Nobody makes Sheriff Buford T. Justice look like a possum's becker. Except for that your ass.
I think it's pretty good. Around up there, I guess. Next is Jennifer's Body from 2009. I'm not sure how to feel about it. It has some clever and funny moments, but a lot of it is kind of uneven and feels at odd with itself. Like, you can tell it's trying to, I guess, be a metaphor for feminism or teenagers or like sexuality or jealousy or like something like that. But it doesn't quite get there in my opinion. I think it's going for this empowering, like, oh, she's striking back at these horrible boys and stuff. But like all the boys she kills in this movie, they're like kind of nice guys. Like, they're not horrible like the people who kind of did the bad things to her. So like some of the message is kind of lost to me. And to me, if it was going for this very female empowering theme, the movie's way too like male gaze for that. It's a movie that feels kind of made and advertised for its like, ooh, softcore lesbianism kind of appeal. I don't know, it's very confused in its messaging and like what it's going for in my mind. To me, it was really at its best when it was going for like straight up, like what we do in the Shadows style comedy, you know?
She can fly.
She's just hovering. It's not that impressive. God, do you have to undermine everything that I do?
There should have been more of that and less of whatever else it was trying to do. So I thought it was okay. I guess is as much as I can give it. Next is Shin Godzilla from 2016. This was a rewatch for me. I'd seen it when it came out and I fucking love it. I haven't seen like a lot of Godzilla movies, but to me this is the best one by far. I love its grounded and very realistic approach to the destruction, to the political response, how creepy and scary Godzilla is in this. I love that he goes through multiple phases. The apocalyptic fire breath laser scene halfway through the movie, it's an all-time memorable movie moment for me. I think like it's a scene that's worth the price of admission alone for sure. And of course, you know, all these Godzilla movies, they serve as these metaphors for Japan's various social insecurities and national identity, natural disasters that they have to deal with. And so this one is quite clearly about the 2011 Fukushima disasters, which I remember happening, and so it's all just very interesting. I think the main negative is that some of the acting is a little meh, especially that one girl who plays it like it's a completely different kind of movie. It's like everyone in the movie plays it like they're just very serious, just normal, regular people, and then she comes in and she's just like playing it up like it's this kind of like very, I don't know, she plays it like she's in a completely different movie, which doesn't work at all, but overall, it's really excellent. I would place it at least up in excellent, that's for sure. That seems like a pretty good spot for it for me. Next is There Will Be Blood from 2007. You know, I'd actually never seen a Daniel Day-Lewis movie until this year, and we saw 3 this year, and all 3 were excellent. He's one of my main revelations of the year in movies, just a really amazing actor. This is a great movie, really good performance by Daniel Day-Lewis, portraying a fascinating and very compelling character that kind of carries the whole film as you watch him change and kind of like break apart over the years. The whole movie has kind of a very foreboding vibe to it where you keep wanting to see what's going to happen next and probably nothing good. The conclusion is a bit sudden, kind of comes out a little bit of nowhere, but it still worked, I thought. I think I would place it at least this high. I'm starting to doubt some of these placements while I'm looking at them, but it's gotta go at least this high. Next is The Day of the Jackal from 1973. This is a movie about an assassin trying to kill French President Charles de Gaulle, I think. It's a really good political thriller. You know, you follow the assassin as he prepares for his hit, so that's very compelling. and there's some good tensions, lots of twists and turns. I love how the roles kind of change throughout the film, because at first, you're kind of cheering for this guy, like not because he's gonna kill someone, but because he's very professional, he's very driven, and so naturally you kind of want to see him succeed in his goal. But then as the movie goes on and he does more and more horrible things, you're like, oh shit, now I really want him to get caught, It's smart, it's believable, and very realistically shot. At times it almost feels like a documentary almost. There's a few questionable moments, but nothing too bad. I thought it was pretty good. Alright, maybe low pretty good, I guess. Next is Lady Bird from 2017. Oh god, this is gonna be another really long video. I need to, I keep saying this, but I'm gonna need to try and pick up the pace a little bit and not talk as much about each movie. This was really good. It's touching and relatable, really captures the highs and lows of a coming of age and being a teenager. Good script, great performances, especially from the lead. Some believable characters for the most part. I enjoyed the complex relationship with the daughter and the mom, and I liked how kind of subtler and more understated some of the side plots were. Overall, it's a very strong movie. I think I would place it in excellent, somewhere around there at least, yeah. Next is Talladega Nights, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby from 2006. This was alright. There's a handful of funny moments. A lot of this movie feels ad-libbed, for better or worse. Like, it leads to some very funny moments and then some not as funny moments, but Baron Cohen is enjoyably over the top as the French driver. It's definitely not as memorable as something like Anchorman, but it was fun. I really don't remember that much about it. I would say it was okay. Maybe like around there. It's an okay film. Next is Spy X Family Code White, which is like a standalone kind of movie based on the anime. Barely even qualifies as a movie, to be honest. It's just a very long episode of the show, and it doesn't work as a standalone at all. Like, if you jump into this, you won't really get it. I think you need to be kind of familiar with these characters already, but everything likable about Spy X Family is in this, so if you like the show, you're gonna like this. It's a charming, funny little side story where each of the three characters get their moments to shine. I'd say it's even more contrived and ridiculous than the show is usually, but it doesn't really matter, it's all in good fun, and the visuals are quite lovely, so this was pretty good. I had a good time watching it. Can go like somewhere there, I guess. Next is The Crow from 1994. I really enjoyed this one. This is a pretty unique movie. Like, it's very much of its era, but it also feels ahead of its time somewhat for some reason. It's corny, but in a good way. And like, it has some great ambiance, some very fitting music, fun script that's just schlucky enough. It's a simple but very effective story, and it just looks very cool. It looks cool, it sounds cool. Now, as you may or may not already know, this movie stars Brandon Lee, of course the son of Bruce Lee, who unfortunately died during the filming of this movie because of an accident with a gun. And so knowing about his death filming this movie, it definitely, unintentionally of course, adds a lot of weight and emotion to his performance and his character, because in the film, he's a character who dies and then he comes back to life to avenge him and his girlfriend who died. So of course, it's very meta in a way, And so while you're watching this, you're like, oh, the character came back to life, but like, this actor actually died filming this. So it definitely adds a layer of, I don't know, like a layer of something, a layer of emotion and weight to his presence in the film. And so unfortunately, that really does elevate the movie to the next level, I think. So I think The Crow, I would have it in excellent, maybe like around there. It's weird to say that the movie would go down a few pegs if it wasn't for the fact that he died, but it really does add kind of like an eerie nature to it that cannot be ignored. Next is Speed Racer from 2008. This is a really strange movie. The whole thing is so gaudy to look at. Like, the CGI is laughably terrible. The visuals painfully saturated. Like this movie, it's very jarring to watch. It kind of hurts to look at, but that also gives it a very unique identity. It also tries a lot of fun things with the cinematography. The story is a bit unfocused, but it has a lot of heart. So it's weird and a bit long for what it is, but I did like it overall, I think. I would place it maybe like somewhere around there. Next is His Girl Friday from 1940. So they intentionally made this movie with the goal of having the fastest movie dialogue in history, at least at the time. And it sure shows because it's fucking non-stop people talking very quickly and very loudly over each other. The story is a bit confusing, so it made this one really hard to follow along because like it's just people talking like non-stop, very, very, very quickly. So the two leads are charismatic and they do have some nice chemistry, and getting to see such an independent, kind of snappy female character all the way back in 1940 was refreshing, but that's about all I can say for this one. It was okay, maybe around there. Next is Le Pacte des Loups, or Brotherhood of the Wolf, as you would know it. This is a movie I added to the list just because the poster, you know, it looks very kind of Bloodborne-ish. So I was expecting some very corny fantasy in the style of Van Helsing. It was surprisingly good. It's a kind of mix of many different genres. Instead of being Van Helsing, it's actually a lot more reminiscent of like Sleepy Hollow. But then there's also a bit of like Pride and Prejudice in there, and then like a bit of Kung Fu for some reason. It's a weird blend of genres, but very entertaining, and I think it does work ultimately. It has like these flashes of brilliance, where I was like, oh, this could be one of the best ones I've seen this year. Like, I was super invested in the first half, really loving the setup and the various characters and like the political intrigue. And I think it does lose a bit of steam in the second half. It doesn't quite deliver on like its many plot points, but I still really loved it overall. It's got some great costumes, pretty good and creative action, especially for the time, 2001. This is a pretty special movie, I think really deserves to be seen. Would I place it all the way in exceptional? I think it's not quite cohesive enough to reach all the way up there for me, but it's definitely excellent. It's a lot of fun to watch. I would probably have it at least this high. It's a very unique movie. If anything I said sounds interesting to you, I do recommend you watch it. I think this is one that deserves to be seen. Next is Pinocchio from 1940. This is of course the Walt Disney one. I thought it was really good considering it's only Disney's second animated film. The animation is truly impressive. It's full of life and details. It was really fascinating to witness and learn about all the groundbreaking animation techniques they had to use for this. Definitely worth reading kind of about the making of. The story, you know, it's serviceable, but it takes some wild and very dark turns, but it does come together in a pretty satisfying way. So not that memorable and not like the most amazing animation, but fairly groundbreaking for its time. So I have to place it at least in pretty good. Next is Point Break from 1991. A really good film. You get 90s Patrick Swayze, 90s Keanu Reeves, you get surfing, skydiving, like this is just pure 90s energy. It's a nice simple story of bank robbers versus undercover police that escalates and delivers thanks to very good script, some good action scenes, and some great chemistry between the characters, especially Keanu and his police partner in this. His friendship rivalry with Swayze is also quite compelling. There's some crazy ass stunts in this one. I think I would have it in like the low excellent. Okay, maybe that's being a little too generous. Maybe like upper pretty good. Somewhere like there, I think, is fine. Next is, we finally got around to it. Star Wars Revenge of the Sith from 2005. So the thing is, we started the year watching all the old Star Wars, then we started watching the prequels, but then we started picking our movies randomly from a list, and so it took a very long time before we actually got to Revenge of the Sith. So This was a rewatch for me. I think it's probably the best of the prequels, which isn't really saying that much, but it's certainly entertaining, but there's just so much about the story that bothers me to this day. Like, the whole purpose of this film is to show how Anakin kind of becomes evil, becomes Darth Vader, and to me, it just fails at that. Like, I didn't feel like they earned his transformation. There's so many questionable choices about the plot that like I couldn't nitpick it forever, but that's just because I'm kind of like a Star Wars nerd like so many of us. So but it is memorable, it's very memeable, it has great battles in it and some great music also, so it is what it is. You know, as I always say, Star Wars would be so good if it was good, so it has to be at least higher than Phantom Menace. I guess around up there. Oh damn, Phantom Menace is really high actually. I think I put Phantom Menace way too high. Phantom Menace can go down like here. And then Revenge of the Sith can go like... yeah, just ahead of it, I guess. Next is All About Eve from 1950. It's pretty good, it's well written, got some good dialogue, good performances. It's an intriguing story. I do feel like just when its conflict is escalating and about to get more complex and dramatic, it kind of like slows down and resolves itself instead of fully going for it, you know? Still good for what it is, and the conclusion was amusing. I think it's pretty good. It's maybe like around there. Next is Face Off.
You want to take his face?
Yeah, his face. Oh. The face.
From 1997. This one is a wild ride from the completely ridiculous premise of being like, you're gonna give me his face and then he's gonna hit my face. And then they trade identity and like it's this cat and mouse story where they're like both trying to kill each other. Some very over-the-top performances from both leads.
Wee, you good looking.
I'm ready for the big ride, baby.
It has some crazy over-the-top action scenes and very cheesy kind of John Woo dramatic flair. It's just a highly entertaining 90s action flick in every way. Like, it's a really dumb movie, but in the best way possible. It's gotta go pretty high, like it's a very entertaining movie. Next is Shadow from 2018. This movie is beautifully shot, it's got some nice sets and a unique visual identity with the muted colors look where it's almost black and white with some splashes of colors there and there. Some nice traditional music and a handful of cool action scenes even though they were a little bit silly. I did find the story a bit confusing / unrealistic. I just wasn't really clear on anyone's motivation, so it was a bit hard to get invested into, but a very good performance from the lead playing two very different roles. It's pretty good. I think maybe like around there. Next is Sorry to Bother You from 2018. This is a really weird movie. Like, it started off quite good, trying unique things with the cinematography, and like I was intrigued by the story and where it was going, but then it takes a massive left turn midway through. Like, it really jumps the shark, or rather jumps the horse. If you know, you know. And then it completely falls apart in the third act. So ultimately the whole thing felt kind of confusing and pointless. I really don't know what they were going for, but it didn't work in my opinion. So it's one of the movies that I like to describe as often amusing, never funny, you know? It's not great. It does try some interesting things, so I have to place it like as high as can be, but not a great movie. Next is Last Action Hero from 1993. This is a Schwarzenegger movie. It's enjoyable. It could be kind of unoriginal and uninteresting, but because it's very self-aware and it parodies the action movie tropes of the era while still being a satisfying action flick of its own. It has its heart in the right place. It's got some very funny and clever moments. The kid is very good in the role of the kid, and I always love me some Charles Dance. He's good in this, as always. So this was pretty good. I would place it about this high. Quite enjoyed it. Next, The Greatest Showman from 2017. The story is pretty cliche, corny, and predictable, but the songs, the choreography, the visuals, they're all great. It's full of spectacle and very kind of positive energy. Everyone does a good job, Hugh Jackman especially. This is a movie based on the life of P.T. Barnum, and after learning more about him, I kind of wish the movie wasn't about him. First of all, because it barely is. Like, it takes so many liberties that it really isn't that much about him in the end. But also because the guy seemed like really awful, so I'm not sure you should have made a very likable movie about his life. But I'd say I liked it overall. Maybe like around there.
A few moments later.
Alright, I took a break to go eat something, but let's keep going now, because we still got quite a few of them. Next is M from 1931. This is a German movie. I think this is one of the first movies to have sound in it. So as one of the earlier sound films made, it's pretty fascinating to watch because a lot of its use of sound and dialogue were pretty groundbreaking at the time. I think the screenplay still holds up quite well today. Like, it's an effective thriller with a fairly interesting story, some social commentary, but it is hard to ignore the context of what would happen only a few years later in Germany, of course, when it's bringing up topics of like due process and the death penalty and like paranoia about your neighbors. You know, you can probably see where I'm going with this, so a little bit distracting, but I don't know, it's one of these that's like, it's such an old movie. It might be the oldest movie I saw this year, so you really have to kind of like watch it in that lens. So like, well, it is very old, so you can't really judge it by the same parameters as you would today. But it's also hard to ignore, you know, it's hard to see it through the eyes of someone in 1931. You have to kind of judge it based on your own point of reference from today. So it's hard to judge such an old movie, you know, like there's not a lot of dialogue in it, but it was interesting to watch just to see like what a movie in that time period would look like. So just for that, I did appreciate it. From the story itself, can't say I really took all that much from it. If I take its age into account, I would probably bring it up a bit more, I guess, would be a bit more fair. Next is Godzilla -1 from 2023. I much prefer Shin Godzilla to this one for a few different reasons, but it was still pretty good. A lot of people have kind of talked about how the budget was pretty low and the effects are very impressive for the low budget. This one, it's not like a slow, very gradual introduction to Godzilla like it is in Shin. Like in this one, he just shows up right at the beginning and he's fucking pissed. He looks like dangerous, he looks angry. And so the setup itself is pretty promising, but I found the plot a bit contrived and unbelievable at times. I thought it was going to be a bit more grounded and like that the whole film was going to be following this family because like they set it up that way, right? Like this guy gets this little family going and like he's got the threat of Godzilla and the war looming in the background. But then that wasn't really a big focus through the movie. Like I thought he was gonna have to like carry them with him as he tries to escape and survive while the country's being destroyed by Godzilla, but they didn't really play much of a role. They're just there as like more motivation. I found that a bit disappointing. Some of the acting is a little bit silly, and I found it resolves itself a little too conveniently, a little too easily. The resolution in Shin Godzilla is also like a little bit convenient and silly, but there's an overall air of like, this is only a temporary solution and things are probably gonna keep getting bad in the future. So I don't think this one ever quite escalates to its full potential, in my opinion. So I thought I think it's pretty good. I think I put Stargate too high. Stargate needs to come down. Next is Phantom Thread from 2017, another movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, although he doesn't have a mustache in this one, so it's the less powerful version of Daniel Day-Lewis. Definitely a good movie. It's compelling, got some good performances, good music, well shot, but so much of it is just bafflingly unrelatable to me. It's like they take a lot of time to establish that every moment these characters share together, they seem so uncomfortable and unpleasant and like uneasy around each other. So why do they stay together? Like you're supposed to believe they're in love, and I kind of get what they were going for, or it's like this adversarial kind of love, but my girlfriend liked this one way more than I did, so I guess I just I guess I just didn't really get it, but it's still a good movie. I would have it like around there, I think. I know the whole time I was just screaming at them, like, if you're not happy together, if she annoys you, if he annoys you, just leave. Like, nothing is forcing you to stay together, just leave. So, I don't know. Next is Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain from 2001, or as it's known internationally, I guess just Amélie. I think this film is fantastic. It's lighthearted, it's super charming, it's unique, it's full of character, some very like clever and snappy editing, full of energy. It has lovely themes and a really great soundtrack. Just really brings you into its own fun little universe, this romantic vision of modern day Paris. And it's an endearing story about finding happiness in like the small things in life and in each other, and trying to bring some joy into like strangers' lives. And I just love what it was going for. Not as much of a fan of like the ugly kind of yellow filter that's over the entire film. The colors look a bit weird, but I do have a big problem with the one stalker dude that's kind of played for a laugh. It's like, oh, it's just funny. Like, he's stalking this woman. It's like, no, that guy was fucked up, and like he should have had his comeuppance, and I hate that he never really gets it. Also, can I just say, this is one of the worst movie posters I've ever seen. Like, I've made a point with this whole list to only use the theatrical release posters. That's why some of them are like a bit strange maybe for you, because they're not typically the ones that are most well known. Like, I always stuck to theatrical release posters. And the poster for Amélie is one of the worst ever. Like, I remember ever since being a kid, because this is a pretty old movie, and like I never wanted to watch it because I was so turned off by this gross poster, which is like it's blurry, the contrast, like she looks weird, it doesn't tell you anything about the movie. Like look at some of these beautiful Korean posters that the movie get. Doesn't that look so much more appealing? Doesn't it make you so much more intrigued about what this film is? Like, I don't know who the fuck came up with this poster, but it's terrible. Still, despite its horrible poster, Amélie, for me, it was one of my favorite movies that I saw this year. Next, we have another Mel Brooks movie, Young Frankenstein from 1974. It's pretty nice. I love the black and white look and the old school style of it with the sets and the visuals. The characters are very fun. Gene Wilder is great in the lead. There's a few funny jokes throughout, but not quite enough to really hold it all together, I feel. Mel Brooks has this weird kind of style of comedy where like it's only a few jokes and then like a lot of it is kind of played straight. It's either that or like he will throw anything at the wall and hope that something sticks. Like, that's kind of what Men in Tights is like. This one is a bit more subdued. I think it's more about kind of the look of it and like the old school style it's going for. It was okay. I think it can be, well, I guess around there. Next, Les Trois Mousquetaires d'Artagnan. So like I've said in the previous video, I'm a big Three Musketeers fan, and this is one of the latest adaptation, of which there are so many. I could make a whole video just about fucking Three Musketeers adaptations because there's dozens of them. And this is just the latest one, but it is a French adaptation, so it is pretty authentic in that way. This is from 2023. I have seen many of the adaptations. I don't think this one worked. The casting to me is way off for the characters. The characters themselves are very poorly established. The plot is a bit messy and unfocused, and like they changed some stuff around in the story that I feel just complicated things. To me, the whole appeal of the Musketeers is like the banter and the camaraderie between the characters, and there was almost none here. Like, there's a few good action scenes, some okay costumes, some alright chemistry between D'Artagnan and Constance, but that's about it. There's a second part to this one. They made it like in 2 movies. I'm not even gonna watch the second movie because the first one was just kinda eh. So at best I can say it was okay. This is about as high as I can have it. I might watch the second one eventually. I just wasn't really tempted by this one. Next is Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977. I'm not sure how to feel about this one. You know me, I love aliens, I love sci-fi, and it does have kind of that magical Spielberg feel to it. Like, there's a few intriguing scenes, and I was curious to see where it was going. But like, There's very little story. There's no real characters or arcs. Like, you're just following these couple people that are seemingly going crazy. The whole film just kind of meanders, it felt to me, and then until the big grand finale, which did look and sound cool and like epic, but that was about it. This one is surprisingly forgettable despite what it's about. I thought it was okay. Only okay. Next is Aliens from 1986, the sequel to the original Alien, of course. This was a rewatch. I'd seen this movie before, and it's still so fucking good. And ironically enough, everything I said was missing from the last two movies I talked about is found in this one. Sigourney Weaver, yet again, an amazing lead in this. This is the one that really solidified her as an action hero even more than the first one. The characters are very quickly established. They're memorable, you care about their fate, or you want to see them die. It expanded the alien lore. The effects still look really great, especially when you learn a bit more about the troubled development and the budget limitations that this movie had. They did an amazing job. There's plenty of tension, some good action that always keeps the focus on the characters, multiple escalating climaxes where like you think it's the end but then like something else happens, and then you think that's the end but then like something else happens. What more can you want? It's about as perfect as a movie of this genre can be, so it's gonna go all the way up here with the original Alien for me. This is an exceptional film. It's an all-time classic. Next is Ghost in the Shell Innocence from 2004. This is the sequel to the original Ghost in the Shell. This one is kind of a blur. I honestly didn't know what was going on most of the time. It's one of many such movies I saw this year where like I watched it, I was like, okay, and then I had to go on Wikipedia to kind of read the synopsis to know what actually happened because it was so kind of strange. And I had to do that for most of the animes I watched, like Ghost in the Shell, Paprika, Perfect Blue to a lesser extent. Like, you get a general idea of the plot, but some of it is kind of vague, and in this one it's especially bad. The story is pretty incoherent. There's a lot of kind of pseudo philosophy being talked about. Just mentioning philosophical topics out loud doesn't make your movie deep. It doesn't make it so you've explored these topics. You just brought them up, you know, you just mentioned them. Some very odd music choices. The animation uses a lot of 3D, which doesn't always look great, and so the result is kind of muddy visually. That's a thing that really happened a lot in the early 2000s. It ended up being kind of boring. To me, the dog was the best part because he was animated so well. Love the dog in this movie. 10 out of 10 dog. Kind of okay movie. Like the first one better, so it's gonna go below the original Ghost in the Shell. I think I would go as far as to place it down in really not much to this one. Kind of a blur. Next is Gangs of New York from 2002. Daniel Day-Lewis is back. His mustache is back at full power. So the initial setup in this movie with like the gangs meeting up, it's so ridiculous that it kind of took me a while to get back into it, because at first I thought, oh, you're going for this very kind of over-the-top thing, but no, they kind of play it straight. I thought Daniel Day-Lewis carried this whole film with yet another amazing performance. Just a very magnetic presence and character. All the sets and the production design are awesome. Looks like a lot of it is pretty historically accurate, which is nice. But it is a bit long and it feels bloated as a movie. It has a very strong second act, but then I think it loses steam a bit in the third act. It's trying to juggle a little too many things. I think if the movie was just focused on Leo and Day-Lewis, would have been a bit more interesting, but I did enjoy it overall. I'd say it's upper pretty good still. Next is Vampire Humaniste Cherche Suicidaire Consentant. This is a Québécois movie. It's a movie from here in Quebec. I want to make an effort in the future to try and watch a bit more movies that were made here, because if we don't watch our own movies, who's going to, you know? So yeah, this is yet another vampire movie. It's about a vampire that doesn't want to kill people, to drink their blood, and so she's looking for someone suicidal who she can like kill without feeling bad about it, and then a lot of kind of funny things happen. So the premise is creative and intriguing. I thought it was well shot, well cast, went in different directions than I expected. a lot of these Quebecois movies kind of suffer from having dialogue that's a bit unnatural, you know, because we know how people talk. And so when you hear someone talking in a bit of an unnatural way, I can really pick up on it. But it's not as bad as some of the other movies I saw. I think there was the potential for them to do even more with the premise. Like the ending feels a little bit rushed, but it works well for what it is. There's one scene where like she's trying to kill herself by eating some poutine, which I thought was really funny. Suicide by poutine is like, that's peak representation right there. I don't know if I would say it's excellent, but I thought it was pretty good. I think I would have it like around there. Next is the Lego Movie from 2014. Really enjoyed this one. It's funny, it's creative, it's full of energy and surprises. The animation is so detailed and impressive. Maybe a bit cluttered visually. Like this is another one of these movies where I felt I kind of needed to watch it in like half-time speed just to kind of see everything that was going on. But it does kind of just make you want to rewatch it to catch some of the stuff you missed. Yes, it's basically one big giant advertisement for Lego, but it has a nice heartfelt message and, you know, a lot of artistry to it. So it's a nice cash grab with a heart, as they say. I don't think I would have it all the way in exceptional, but it was excellent. I think it would need to be at least this high, and it could potentially be even higher. Like if someone thought it was exceptional, I would get it because there's just so much going on in it, but I'm gonna be moderate and say it was excellent. Next is The Lost Boys from 1987. This is kind of a strange movie, but pretty entertaining. Like the tone is hilariously uneven. Half of it is this goofy kind of Home Alone teenage comedy where like these little boys are trying to fight off vampires, and then the other half is this very kind of serious melodramatic vampire story. It should be a complete mess, but somehow they do kind of mesh and work together. The 80s energy in this one is through the roof. I thought it was pretty good. Maybe somewhere around there. Next is The Handmaiden from 2016. This was something. It's a twisted tale of perversion and deceit and revenge and like deception. It does take a while to get started, but because there's twists after twist, and then like this character was actually doing this, and then they were actually lying and they were doing this, and you can't help but get invested and want to see where it's going. It's well shot, but be warned, it is very explicit. Like it's basically just porn at one point, so do keep that in mind. Like all the characters are just really fucked up in their own way, especially the men in this who like they're so horrible, you just want to see them die by the end. It's not a very relatable human story, but it was still entertaining to watch. I guess it was pretty good. I guess it would be like around there. Next is the Lego Batman movie. So Batman is in the Lego movie, and then they made a whole movie about just that character. Just like the Lego movie, really enjoyed this one. It's also very, very funny. Almost all of the jokes land. It has a lot of fun with its license. There's a ton of hilarious little references to previous Batman lore. If you've seen a lot of other Batman content, like there's a lot of little references in here for you. Again, great snappy animation and a pretty satisfying story. I did find the cameos a bit more distracting and unnecessary in this one compared to the original Lego, which is kind of like all about cameos. In this one, I feel like the roster of Batman characters available is already large enough where you don't really need these other cameos from like different franchises, but I guess I'm nitpicking a little bit. It was still a lot of fun, somewhere around there. It's a bit lower than the original. Next is Brokeback Mountain from 2005. So I was always aware of this movie, but I'd never seen it until now. And so after decades of kind of seeing it used as a punchline, it was nice to actually finally see it. And it's really good. It's a very compelling, nuanced drama with very great subdued acting by both leads. Especially Heath Ledger, who gets a bit more focus in this one. I love that it kind of follows them through the years and you can see their lives change and evolving and how their relationship also changes. Very nice, kind of understated soundtrack. It was a very important story to tell, especially back in 2005, but even now in 2025, you still don't really see that many films focused on like gay men. Specifically gay men, like not in the modern time, but kind of like in previous decades and what life was like for them, you know? I was kind of caught off guard by its ending, but I found all of it very effective. So this is an excellent movie. Maybe like somewhere up there. Next is Sweet Smell of Success from 1957. It's an entertaining movie, some good acting by both Curtis and Lancaster as the two sleazy, very ambitious and manipulative guys that kind of alternate between being allies and then being enemies, and like their very selfish quest for fame and success. The back and forth drama did keep my attention, but to me the best part is all the snappy lines and one-liners and comebacks that they have for each other. You never know what they're gonna say next. Just a lot of great, memorable and witty dialogue. It doesn't always sound natural, of course, but it does make it a lot of fun to watch. This one was like, I guess, pretty good. Somewhere around here, I think. Next is Suzume from 2022. This is another fantastic Makoto Shinkai film with absolutely gorgeous visuals, a lovely story. The fantasy elements are like a bit more over the top in this one compared to Your Name. Like there's a few cliches and a few things that are like a bit out there, but the heart of the movie is in the journey and the road trip that she goes on, all the helpful people she meets along the way and the new friends she makes. There's just such a hopeful, heartwarming vibe to this whole movie. I don't think it quite hits the emotional highs of Your Name, but it's great in its own right and truly, again, a spectacle to watch. Visually so beautiful. Also, a guy gets turned into a chair for like most of this movie. It's just such a strange idea for a movie. Like, oh, she has to bring this guy who gets turned into a chair. And you're like, a chair? Why a chair? Watch the movie and they make it work. This is an exceptional movie also. It's definitely not as strong as Your Name, but like they can kind of bookend this whole... Again, not that they are in order here, but I did like Your Name much better than Suzume, but I still think it's an exceptional movie. Now it kind of makes me want to go back and watch all the other Makoto Shinkai movies, to be honest. Next is Seven Samurai from 1954. This is considered a classic for a few different reasons. It's one of the first big kind of epic adventure movies. It's one of the first team-up movies where like a bunch of heroes get together. That being said, it is very long. I think this one is also over 3 hours in length. With it being not only a much older movie, but also a Japanese movie, I did feel a quite big cultural divide where like there were a lot of scenes and interactions between the characters that I didn't really understand, like the social cues. So I was sometimes very confused about like, oh, why did he react this way to this being said to him? Or like, oh, why would he do this? Or... That said, it's an impressive movie from a technical standpoint, and you can definitely feel its influence on movies that have come out since this one. I mean, its concept is just such a classic, you know? It's universal, it works in any era, any language. It's just a team of heroes teaming up together to defeat a common enemy, so... But watching it 70 years later as a non-Japanese person, I would say it was okay. Well, I think the highest I can go is probably around there, if I'm being honest with myself. Next is Akira from 1988. This is another one considered a groundbreaking classic of sci-fi and animation, and I would say deservedly so. The world is so detailed and creative and very believable. It feels like a real world. The action scenes are very visceral and explosive. Yeah, the characters can look a bit wonky and like some of the art style is not always that great looking. The characters also aren't particularly likable. Like even the main guy who's supposed to be a hero does a lot of things that are like kind of unbecoming of a hero, and yeah, the plot can be a bit unclear at times and hard to follow, but The story is so wild and unpredictable that you kind of just want to see what crazy thing is going to happen next. It just keeps escalating more and more and more until the very fucking crazy ass ending. This is one that's definitely worth watching just for the spectacle of it. I think I would have to bring this one in the high, pretty good, I guess, around there. Next is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever from 2022. I watched this one on the plane to California. And when we're talking about the later MCU movies that have been kind of like on a downward slope, I would say this one is alright. It's one of these later MCU movies that while it's in its rebuilding stages. Now with that being said, it was a very hard movie to make considering the passing of Chadwick Boseman. Like they were placed in a very unviable position of having to kind of, you know, continue Black Panther's movie without Chadwick being there to play him. So I think they handled it about as well as you could in the circumstances. I like that it focuses on a lot of the female characters. Just like the first one, it has great African-inspired music, costumes, sets. I also quite enjoyed the antagonist in this and how they made him very justified and sympathetic, and you kind of root for him in a way. But then they did kind of drop the ball with him in the last act, where like he kind of turns around and his motivation is a bit harder to justify, but the story overall was pretty average. It's not a very memorable movie. I would still have it in the low pretty goods, I guess. Next is Alien Resurrection from 1997. This was a rewatch. I did skip over 3, which wasn't intentional. It just happened that I was with someone who was watching Alien 4. If I had to rank Alien 3, I would probably say it's pretty good. Like I'd have to see it again. It's been a while since I last saw it, but I remember it being pretty good. Alien 4 goes in such a different direction than the first 2 did. Like the first one is a horror, the second one is more action. This one is just 4 is just so fucking corny and over the top kind of sci-fi horror. I still find it quite enjoyable for what it is. Like I like seeing Sigourney Weaver trying something different with her character, doing like a different sort of Ripley and having fun with it. The effects are still pretty damn good for the time, like both the CGI effects and the practical effects. For 97, it still looks pretty good. It's corny, it doesn't take itself seriously, which I like. So yeah, it's a departure from what the series had been until then, but it's fun for what it is, I think. Alien 4 would have maybe around there. Next is Starship Troopers from 1997. This is a weird one because you always hear about like, oh, it's a satire and it's like political commentary about the military and like propaganda and like things like that, but I feel like it's played so straight that any satirical aspect kind of gets lost. It's this very odd mix of genres where like half of it is this action sci-fi, but then the other half is more like this high school drama almost. It feels like the old Power Rangers show with like the high school teenage love drama. It's like they wanted to make a parody, but then they forgot halfway through and just wrote like a regular standard story. Still, the effects are nice. It has a lot of iconic visuals and scenes. It's a very memorable movie. So overall, it is enjoyable. Maybe like around there. Yeah, no, it's just a strange movie. Next is Sleeping Beauty from 1959. This is a nice, very safe animation classic. I found it funny how little dialogue the prince and the princess actually have in this film. They're barely characters at all. It's really all about the fairies, really. I like that it's going for something a little bit different visually, like it's got this simplistic kind of blocky style. And Maleficent, you know, she's an all-time great villain in character. She's very cool. So not really much more to this one. I think I liked it a little bit better than Pinocchio. How much did I like it? I do have a lot of movies and pretty good. I think it's kind of natural where like your ratings will form a kind of little mountain where like there's very few bad movies, very few exceptional movies, and then it kind of like bloats in the middle, you know, which is what happened here with this list. Sleeping Beauty, you know, it's fine. It's very safe. There's nothing that interesting about it, but it's okay for what it is. So maybe around there. Next is Idiocracy from 2006. What's there to say? We're kind of living in it already, aren't we? As a movie meant to kind of warn us about the dangers of society being stupid and electing stupid people into office, it's kind of sad to see how much of it is coming true. It's a fairly clever idea for a movie, even though a lot of it is very on the nose, of course. There's a handful of funny moments and jokes, but under all the very ham-fisted social commentary, there's not much to the movie itself. Like, it's just a bunch of nothing characters. A lot of the jokes kind of fall flat. It really has that early 2000s stank of like, to me that was the dark age of movies, with like there was so many bad movies coming out in the early 2000s, and this one kind of has that feel to it. At best, I would say it was okay. I guess there. Now I feel like I've been too harsh on Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is not worse than Idiocracy. I guess 3 categories for this is a little too much, right? Like and not great and bad. They're kind of redundant. I should just call it like meh, and then just have everything in there. Right? They just have all the meh movie in one category at the bottom. Next, Hello Dolly from 1969. I really enjoyed this one. It's a charming story, a lot of likable characters, some very catchy songs, impressive dance numbers, a lot of spectacle and heart, just a lot of nice positive energy to the whole thing. You could say maybe the romances are a little bit undercooked, sure, but overall, really excellent. It's one of my favorites I saw this year. Would I go all the way in exceptional? I think I'm gonna go just short of having it an exceptional, but really excellent one. I love the songs, love the dance numbers. Next is Jaws from 1975. It's considered an all-time classic, of course. As an early Spielberg movie, you know, it does a lot of things right. Things that would be kind of like taken for granted in later decades, you know, not showing the monsters and things like that. I thought the bonding between the 3 guys on the boat was pretty enjoyable. The theme for Jaws, of course, it's an all-time legendary theme that everyone recognizes instantly. It was also pretty interesting to read about how troubled the development was on this one. I do feel kind of bad for the sharks following this movie. Like, I think this movie probably contributed a lot to fear of sharks and to a lot of sharks probably being killed in the decades that followed, so I feel kind of bad for that. But other than that, I think it's okay. Can go next to the other Spielberg movie, I guess. Next is Rocky from 1976. That's right, we were catching up on our 70s classics. Rocky, you know, it was all right. It has a kind of like unique mood and feel to it, you know, that kind of low budget 70s charm. I think I just really like movies from the 70s, to be honest. But Rocky himself as a character, you know, he's really awkward, but I guess that's kind of the point. I didn't really like that one scene where he gets a little bit too rapey for my taste, where like he's forcing the girl into his apartment and then he won't let her leave. And I'm like, red flag, red flag. But she does fall for him, of course, as they always do, so I guess it's all good. It builds a lot of interesting relationships between Rocky and all these other characters, but they do feel a bit unresolved by the end. And the big fight that the whole movie is building up to the whole time, it's surprisingly kind of glossed over. Like, they just do it very quickly and then the movie ends right after, and like you don't see the fallout of it. You don't really see what it meant for the characters. Rocky was okay. Yeah, it's around there, I think, for me. Next is The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear from 1991. There's not much to say about this one. It's really just kind of the same as the first one, just a different story. It's the same absurd comedy with puns and visual gags that I love. I don't think it's quite as strong as the first film, but it was still very funny. I would say it was still pretty good. I would have it maybe like there. Next is Interview with the Vampire from 1994. Now, if you're a fan of vampire media or even just good media, I very highly recommend watching the Interview with the Vampire TV show. Phenomenal series, just amazing. If I ranked it, it would definitely be exceptional. I think it's a must watch. So when going back and watching this movie after seeing the TV show, obviously you have to kind of like divorce it from the TV show, because the TV show is leagues above this movie in every way. You know, they get a lot more time to develop the character. The story is really expanded upon in interesting ways. The actors in it are just phenomenal. So if you forget about the TV adaptation and you just take this movie for what it is, it's an alright movie. You know, it's about as good as you could do in the 90s with the runtime of one movie to tell this story. Obviously, the relationship between Louis and Lestat could be more developed, but again, they have limited time to really do it. There's plenty of very melodramatic vampire angst for fans of that. Kristen Dunst is pretty impressive for her young age, given a very difficult role. Tom Cruise, you know, I was surprised. He does surprisingly well as a very unhinged version of Lestat. He's no Sam Reed, that's for sure. Sam Reed is in a league of his own. But Tom Cruise still did pretty well. That said, this is not Brad Pitt's best role. He's kind of very wooden in this one. I think it's okay. I guess it's around there for me. Next is, oh man, An American in Paris, 1951. This is another Gene Kelly musical, which I'm usually a huge fan of. And the musical dance numbers in this are great, as usual for a Gene Kelly film. But man, did they make him unlikable, which is usually very hard. You know, Gene Kelly is so naturally lovable, but he's really bad in this one. And it's because the romance that they're going for is downright repulsive and uncomfortable to watch. So his love interest in this movie is a 16-year-old girl who like he keeps harassing, like a straight up predator. Like he harasses her while she's with friends. Like he forces her to give him her phone number under false pretenses. He calls her at her work, and then when she tells him to never call here again, he goes there physically and then keeps pestering her until finally she'll go on a date with him. And then of course, you know, of course she falls in love with him, but for the first like third of this movie, she wants nothing to do with him and he just keeps insisting and like harassing her. It's really uncomfortable to watch. I don't know why they went with this, and I have to imagine, even for the 50s, like this must have been wrong, right? Like, was any of this really considered okay or charming in 51? I don't know. But like for me, I couldn't look past it. It was just disgusting. And like the whole time he's doing this, he's pursuing this underage girl while brushing aside another woman who's like into him. She actually is interested in him, and like she's actually his age, and like she's rich. She wants to like give him money for his art, and like he just kind of brushes her aside, and like he's pursuing this other girl instead. Just a lot of very weird choices. It could have been this very kind of silly, lighthearted like love triangle thing, but that's not what they went with. So other than that, if you forget all that, it's a pretty nice movie. It has nice sets, nice songs. The dancing is very good as always. It is kind of weird how they piled up like 30 minutes of dance numbers right at the end with no story. He just kind of gets into this like metaphysical dance number. And then for the last like 30 seconds, they bring it back to the movie and then it ends. It's like, couldn't you have like spread those out through the whole film? Why is it all piled up at the end? I don't know. It's a strange movie. If it wasn't for the gross underage girl stalking, this one would be like a pretty good movie, but I can't look past that shit. I will have it like around here just because the dancing, you know, it's very good and the sets do look nice. But next is The Northman from 2022. This is a movie by Robert Eggers, who made one of my favorite movies of all time in The Lighthouse. Now, this is not a very original story because, I mean, it's literally Hamlet. It's about the actual Hamlet character, but it does have that Robert Eggers flair. It's very raw and visceral. There's a lot of naked dudes roaring around bonfires in the forest. For fans of that, it's got a lot of like that very animalistic kind of violence and passion. Some very nice shots. All the actors give 100% performances. Got some cool traditional music and set design, and you can tell they went the extra mile for historical accuracy, which I always appreciate. So this one was, I think maybe I would bring it like around here. We're almost there. So next is See How They Run from 2022. This was a fun one. It's got all the elements I would usually love, you know, very small cast, kind of detective story. The style of it, like the caricatural characters and the costumes and the lighting and everything gives it a very theatrical quality, which I assume is intentional considering the whole movie is kind of about a play. So I do enjoy that aspect, but it does kind of take away from its authenticity at times. Like, it's not a movie that feels like it's taking place in the time period it's taking place in, if that makes sense. Like, it feels like a modern movie with people in costumes, you know? But the two leads, they're very fun together. They have great chemistry. The cast gives it their all, but the mystery itself, it's not all that interesting and it never quite reaches its full potential, in my opinion. Like, instead of escalating to this great conclusion, it just kind of, they investigate it and then the movie kind of ends. So could have been more, but still it was a fun one for what it was. I think I would have it in excellent. Maybe I was a bit harsh on Dune. I'll bring Dune up a bit. I think Rear Window should probably be down here. Oh shit, Dune just keeps going up. In the Mood for Love, maybe I placed a bit too high. Next is The Wind Rises from 2013. This was Miyazaki's final movie before he did The Boy and the Heron, which I haven't seen yet. It's a Ghibli, so it's a visual spectacle, some beautiful scenes and colors, just a wonderful animation. You can tell there's a big attention to detail in the environment, in the props, the planes. I love all the shots you see of crowds and like you can see all the little individual characters moving around, like so much detail is packed in these. I loved how the dream sequences really felt like a dream and how they were like bending the rules of what was happening. It has a great soundtrack. I love how it kind of uses Italian music, even though it's like a Japanese setting to fit the theme of Italian planes. And the story does feel a bit all over the place, but to me that fits the theme of following someone through their life. You know, our lives are not really a linear story. It kind of goes all over the place, and it did so in this as well. I did think it was a bit of an odd choice to add a fictional romance to the retelling of a real person's life. Like, I guess it makes it a bit more interesting for viewers, but like, isn't that kind of strange? But yeah, find yourself someone who loves you as much as Miyazaki loves planes. My man loves fucking planes. I think it was excellent. I wouldn't quite place it all the way in exceptional. 1917 should go up a bit. I have to place it higher than Lego, which is like a big advertisement movie. I think I have to bring it at least here. Next is Swing Time from 1936. This is the second oldest movie I saw this year, I think. This was enjoyable. The dance numbers are very lovely. Fred Astaire makes it look so damn easy. Like, you watch him dance and it looks so easy, but he was just a master at it. I think he has really, really good chemistry with Ginger Rogers. They're just super charming together. Parts of the story were like a bit puzzling. I wish it focused a bit more on just the two of them and not all these other kind of side characters. I know, I always have this thought when watching these really old movies. People just have strange interactions, and I guess it's just because like social norms have kind of evolved over time. But I mean, this movie is almost 100 years old, to be fair, so it was nice overall. You do have to kind of ignore the one blackface dance number late in this movie. Obviously, that shit doesn't fly today, but 100 years ago, I guess it was just normal. So you have to just kind of ignore that one part. And other than that, it's an okay movie. So I think it was pretty good. I think I would have it around there. Next is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night from 2014. I think this is an Iranian movie. It's all in black and white and takes place in like this kind of like fictional Iranian city. It was okay. I'd say the story is only mildly interesting, but it does look very nice and stylized, and it has some great framing and lighting and intriguing use of music. Like, it's about as artsy-fartsy as a movie can get before it gets like unbearable to watch, you know what I mean? I will say the main guy in this, he was pretty hot. And my girlfriend agrees, to which my girlfriend agrees also. I think it was okay. Like, there's really not that much going on in there. I guess I would place it about this high. Next we have Patterson from 2016. This is legitimately the most uneventful movie I think I've ever seen. It's hard to even call it boring because the lack of anything happening is kind of fascinating in a way. Like I kept expecting some giant twist. Like we kept watching, I was like, okay, it's really boring so far, but obviously they're building up to something, you know? And then it just kept going and nothing was happening. I was like, it's gonna be all leading up to something. There's gonna be a giant twist like midway through. And then it just kept going. I was like, at the very end, like something's gonna happen that justifies the whole movie. And then nothing happens. And then the movie just ends. It's just the boring daily life of like a boring guy and his really awkward girlfriend. They have these very unnatural, weird conversations. I guess that's the whole theme, is like you're supposed to be like fascinated by what the intricacies of the boring nature of his life. Like I don't know what they were going for. I guess the whole thing is about poetry, and I hate poetry, so I guess that's why I didn't get it. But like the poems in this I found was just terrible. They're not even poems. They're like, I wake up today and I pick up my pencil and I start writing. I put on my shoes and then I walk outside the door. My shoes are blue. My laces are white. My shoes are blue with white laces. Like that's it. That's the fucking poems. He's just like saying things. Like I tend to hate poetry in general, but this kind of pretentious, artsy-fartsy, nothing poetry that doesn't even rhyme, like I cannot stand. I thought this movie was a baffling use of the time of everyone involved. Like Adam Driver, he's a very talented actor. Why was he necessary in this? What were they going for? I think, again, I can't say it was completely boring because I was kind of fascinated by what I was seeing. I was like, they have to be going somewhere with this, right? Like at some point, they hint that maybe his dog is gonna get stolen. You're like, oh, okay, so maybe that's gonna happen, but then no. And then they're like, oh, maybe something's gonna happen at his work. Like, no. And then like his girlfriend, it's building up to like maybe they're going to like break up or something. Nothing happens. I just couldn't fucking believe it. Like I wasn't as bored watching it as I was with some of these others, but by the end, I'm just like, why did I watch this movie? Why was this movie made? I don't know. It's terrible. Next is Children of Man from 2006. I won't lie. It was very, very distracting how much of the plot of this movie is shared with The Last of Us. And to be fair to this movie, it came out before The Last of Us. So if anything, Last of Us, I think, was maybe inspired by the plot of this movie, or at least the plot of the book that it's based on. Like so many beats in the story are straight out of Last of Us. I mean, there's no zombies in this. The premise is actually different. It's about what if we just stopped having babies? You know, what if the whole world became infertile? Just suddenly, no one can have babies anymore. And like, how would that affect society? And how would that affect like how people act and like how we lead our lives? And the answer in this movie is, well, the world will probably go to complete shit, which I think is fairly realistic, because why keep going if this is going to be the end of mankind? You know, people kind of just give up and stop having the will to live, and just, I don't know, it's a very, very interesting concept that you could tell so many different stories with. You know, you can take it in so many different directions. I thought this movie was pretty good overall. It has these very long single shot action sequences that are very intense, like you're right there in the trenches with them, and like the camera doesn't cut. At some point there's like blood that gets splattered on the camera, and like they just kept it there. So they're very intense, very impressive. There's a lot of very dark, kind of bleak imagery of like people dying and like in concentration camps and just like giving up and killing each other, and just, you know, some pretty depressing shit. But then there's also kind of like some hopeful moments of humanity between the characters, and like once you reach the end with what happens there. So it feels a bit inconclusive, like the ending is a little bit sudden, but I thought it was a good movie overall. I think Killers of the Flower Moon needs to go up in excellent, even though it's very long. Like it's a very effective story. Maybe somewhere around there. I don't know, it's getting really hard to tell, man. Like, there's so many of these fucking movies in this list. I don't even know anymore, but somewhere around there, I guess. Next is Donnie Brasco from 1997. Really love this one. This is another undercover cop story with some very good performances, well-established characters. It has drama, tension, compelling narrative. I love Al Pacino in this. I love Michael Madsen in this. It's another one that's like pretty long, but it doesn't really feel that long because there's a lot going on and like you care about what's happening. Really love all the scenes between Depp and Pacino. This was just a great movie. I think I would have it at least this high. Next is Crazy from 2005. This is another Quebecois movie, one of only two in my list. Unfortunately, I'll have to try and do better in the following year, but this is one of the most well-known movies to come out of Quebec, I think. It follows this Quebec family of 5 boys and their parents in the 70s and 80s. Well, it's mostly focused on like 1 or 2 of them. It's his coming-of-age story and like having to come to terms with his homosexuality while also dealing with a very religious father. And so it sounds very heavy and kind of depressing, but it's actually, it does have like a certain levity because like the cinematography is pretty energetic. And so very good use of music and old songs to set the tone in this one. And it did tug at my heartstrings, and like it has some very emotional scenes, and like anything that deals with like your complicated relationship with your father, I think like most of us can kind of relate with that. So this was excellent. I don't know if I would place it all the way. Like I'm tempted to put it all the way up here just because I want to encourage people to see it, you know, like want to encourage people to see more Quebec movies. For me, I think it would probably sit like around there, but I want to encourage people to go to seek it out and watch it. So I will place it a bit higher. And at last, we have The Wizard of Oz from 1939. Did not pick this one to be the final movie, but it kind of fits because, you know, it's considered an all-time classic movie. And it's very good. It's got kind of like this timeless quality to it where you can see why it became, you know, a classic. The production design is very impressive. The characters, you know, they're likable. The music, the themes, you know, they're very memorable. You know, the theme for the witch, the very memorable stuff. The Wicked Witch of the West, bro. So yeah, this was enjoyable. I was a little bit bummed out to read about kind of the behind the scenes of this movie and like kind of the sexual harassment that Judy Garland was going through. And like, I don't really want to take the behind the scenes stuff into account when I judge these movies, but like it does kind of taint your perception of them. But I would say The Wizard of Oz was pretty good. And that's it. That's all 184 movies I watched this year. It bothers me that these are not aligned. Yeah, there you go. Now it's nice and even. So again, could have ranked these in a bunch of different orders. Like if I opened this list every day, I would probably move stuff around because your perception of these keeps changing, and like it depends on kind of the mood you're in and like what you remember at a specific moment. And I just wanted to document the movies I saw this year and talk to you about them and maybe give you guys some recommendations. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't seen them, seek out Your Name, Whiplash, Dungeons and Dragons, Old Boy, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Alien and Aliens, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Fargo, Get Out, Interstellar, When Marnie Was There, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Birdman, They Clone Tyrone, Deadpool, I get it's more of a me thing, that's fine. Amelie, Suzume, I do recommend Crazy and Last Up in Yuma County, and also Hello Dolly if you're into these musicals. Also, seek out Brotherhood of the Wolf. It's a very unique movie I think you should see. Like, I want to encourage people to watch maybe some of these lesser known titles. So these are kind of like my favorites for the year. This took a very long time to film and even longer time to edit together. So I hope some people will be interested to watch it. And tell me if you like these kinds of videos. Tell me if you like these kind of tier lists, and I'll consider maybe making this like a tradition on the channel. One time a year, I can afford doing it. I couldn't do these too often, but if I just do it like once at the end of the year, then I guess I can try and find the time. I don't know if I'm going to be watching as many movies this year. Now that we've fallen into this habit, I guess we're going to keep going. I do feel like I've watched most better known movies now, but you know, there's thousands and thousands of movies out there, so There's always more to see, and I think it's as you start getting into these lesser known movies that you start discovering some real gems. So again, just like in the first video, tell me about the movies that you saw this year. What was your top 5 films of the year? I'm sure I don't need to let you know if there's some of these rankings you completely disagree with. I'm sure you'll feel the need to tell me. We're done with these tier list videos, so next week will be the return of the Stanley Parable for those who want to see more of that. And Happy New Year. Also, I forgot to say it in the last video, but a very Happy New Year. I hope 2025 treats you well and that you will be watching a lot more of my videos. So I had fun doing this, I hope you had fun watching it, and that you will catch me in the next video. À la prochaine.